Hello and welcome to the Ag Shop. This is the Ministry of Gentlemanly Ag Teachers, where we share with you the tips and tricks that have made us the highly mediocre, yet controversial ag teachers we are today. And on this, the inaugural episode of the ministry, I am joined by my esteemed colleague, former student, the one, the only, soon to be, Dr. Lyle Logeman. And I am Marshall Swafford, and my preferred pronoun is Swaff. And so, Lyle, as we get this podcast rolling in an attempt to ensure that ag education proceeds for the next 108 years since the passage of the Smith-Hughes Act, for another 108 years, Lyle and I have taken it upon ourselves to shoulder the burden of making ag education great again through a weekly podcast where we discuss all of the trials and tribulations that ag teachers will encounter. And in an attempt to support new teachers especially, and those teachers that came to this great profession from another sector of agriculture or outside of agriculture altogether, we know that over the course of our, in Lyle's case, short career and my gray-bearded career, that when you start in this profession, you don't know everything. In fact, you know closer to nothing than you know closer to everything. And it's our goal with this podcast to do our best to inform our colleagues and contemporaries about the opportunities that exist for them and their students, provide access for our friends and colleagues to those individuals out there and organizations and vendors that cater to this industry and to this market to help them do a better job, I guess, for themselves and for their students. With this podcast airing towards the end of August of 2025. Most of us have started school or will be starting school shortly. I know my kids started in Oklahoma, a week and a half ago. They're going to be at the end of the first quarter before we get started over here in the great land of Texas, which after moving here, I found is actually like another country. And so while after our little introduction here, let's let the viewers learn a little bit about us. So if you'd take, not the 45 minutes that you took on introducing yourself on the website, which is www.preachingaged.com. Please tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got into this game and maybe what caused you to give me that phone call back earlier this spring, cussing one day about ag education and why we needed to do this.
Well, thank you, Swaff, and you've been a friend and a mentor of mine for a long time. We've known each other closer probably to 10 years, and it's been a long 10 years to know each other, don't you think?
I am worse off because of it.
I was second in line to be Pope, but then I met Dr. Marshall Swafford, and everything changed after that. And so here I am, enjoying a wonderful career as an ag educator in Texas. I'm originally from the state of New Mexico, born and raised there on the high plains of eastern New Mexico and West Texas, and so that's kind of the region I'm very familiar with. I was fortunate. I'm a product of ag education. Most autobiographies start with a lot of, well, he was born on this date and here, and this is what his parents did. And we'll talk about all that and how that made us really the people that we are. But I'm a product of ag education. And I had a wonderful ag teachers. I had 3 ag teachers in my time in high school and in FFA. And just simply because they were a sanctioned ag teacher at a high school doesn't mean I haven't had a lot of other ag educators in my life who were involved in other professions. But our profession is so all-encompassing. It covers the whole gambit. There's so many different genres of this of being involved in ag education, the 3-circle model, and whether it's FFA or 4-H or of the many other educational opportunities to be involved. But I was involved in FFA all through high school. Agriculture education but I'm an ag teacher first and FFA advisor second, and I want to make that very well known, and I'm a firm believer in that. I had an opportunity to serve 2 years as a state officer and then served as a national FFA officer. And then I'm a high school ag mechanics teacher now, entering my 4th year of teaching. And when I first started, I thought I knew a little about a lot. And now I realize every day how much I don't know. And that is an ever compounding part of my life is that agriculture education is so far reaching and wide and so many various topics that can be covered daily. And so that is the purpose of this podcast, the Ministry of Gentlemanly Ag Teachers and Gentlewomanly Ag Teachers. We're gonna have all kinds of different ag teachers and those involved in industry on this podcast. And so that is where we're at, and we're just happy to bring this to. Hopefully, it'll help our profession and all those involved.
Thank you, Lyle, for introducing yourself and telling us a little about what's going on. Now, you recently just moved, and I'll talk about myself here in a second, but could you let the viewers know where you teach now? Do you have teaching partners? Are you a one-person shop? How's that? How is it things different now than where you started here 4 years ago?
Well, I started in Whiteface, Texas. We had two of us. I had kind of a veteran ag teacher. Well, he was a veteran ag teacher. He had 15 years in at that point. My first teaching partner, he could do anything. Work in the shop, excellent with livestock, excellent with training teams. He was an all-around, well-rounded ag teacher, and I was proud to call him a teaching partner. I taught in Whiteface for a year, and then I moved up to Panhandle, Texas, which is northeast of Amarillo, about 30 minutes.
So it's in the Panhandle.
Yeah, it's Panhandle, Texas, the town in the Panhandle of Texas.
So is that like a double negative?
Originally, I think Panhandle, they wanted to be Amarillo. They thought that was going to be Amarillo. This is going to be the hub of the Texas Panhandle right here, aside from Lubbock and Amarillo. And these are going to be, but Panhandle did not, that started off as a railroad town, and it's an agricultural based town, like a lot of rural towns in Texas Panhandle. It didn't become, at one time, it was the most heavily populated region in the Texas Panhandle because of the railroad. And now it's a town of about 2,500 people, and Amarillo's just down the road about 30 minutes. And so it's a wonderful place. It was great to teach there. Taught there for 2 years, and now I'm, I guess something we're dealing with in ag education is we all move a lot. And so I moved down to Stephenville, Texas, the cowboy capital of the world, and I'm now here teaching high school ag mechanics in an excellent program. I have 3 teaching partners who are wonderful, and it's different now to be in a department where there are 4 of us. Lots of moving parts, more moving parts than I've seen in my 3 years of teaching, going into my 4th. And it's a different world. It's a different world having that many teaching partners and having this big of a program. I probably see my 150 kids a day alone, 160 kids a day. Got wonderful students, but I've been happy to move down here and to kind of. I don't want to move again. I'm done. I'm tired of moving. You've moved a lot. I'm tired of it. It's aged me. It's taken years off my life moving. So I'm here to stay for a while.
Well, and we'll ask about some of those moving parts a little bit later as we talk about some of the focus of today's episode. And as Lyle introduced himself briefly, I will do my best to introduce myself briefly. I am originally from a little town in northwest Missouri called Savannah. It's about an hour north of Kansas City. I was a Chiefs fan before Patrick Mahomes was even thought of, so can't accuse me of only becoming a Chiefs fan because Patrick is my homie, was born well after I became a Chiefs fan. I was fortunate enough to have my father as my ag teacher, and my father was one of those legends in his own mind in Missouri ag education, and taught for a couple of years in South Dakota when he first started teaching in the 70s, and moved back to Missouri in I was born in 1977, and Dad and Mom moved to Savannah when I was 1, and Dad stayed for the next 30 years and retired in 2008 for about 7 days, and then Mom threatened him with instant death if he didn't find something else to do, and then popped over the river and went and taught in Kansas for another 9 years before he finally decided to hang it up. I began teaching in 2000 after graduating from Northwest Missouri State University in a little town called Union Star, Missouri, which, as you are an old history buff, Lyle, Union Star was actually a Union stronghold in the Confederate area of northern Missouri during the Civil War time. When I first started teaching, we had 74 kids in the high school, and I had a class of sophomore students. There was 9 of them, 8 of them were cousins. And so it was one of those tighter knit kind of communities. Taught there for a year, had a land judging team that made it to the national contest, and then I had an opportunity to move down south of where I grew up about 20 miles to take over an ag program that had recently removed an ag teacher and wanted somebody to come in and kind of patch it up and see if we could kind of make it new again. And I went down there for a couple of years and got a lot of money to do it. And then I stumbled my way into a grad assistantship at the University of Missouri and went and got my master's and met my kids' mother, got married, started on a PhD. That didn't jive at that time. And my kid's mother and I moved to Oklahoma where she had gotten her degree. and taught in Oklahoma for 4 years. And had a couple of children in the meantime. In 2010, we had a daughter with some health issues and moved back closer to where I grew up and taught in Northwest Missouri again, and had a great little place, a little town called Albany, Missouri. Good kids, great people. Really enjoyed it. And then life happened, got divorced. I had been able to finish my degree and made my way to the eastern plains of New Mexico and had an opportunity to meet Mr. Lyle Luberman when he was a sophomore in high school at a speech contest in Light, New Mexico, I think. First time I met Lyle, I was like, wow, who is this just good-looking young ag teacher? As it turns out, the guy with the big, deep voice was like 16 years old. And I was like, well, this guy's more of a man than I'll ever be. Turns out he's not, and he doesn't know as much as I think I do. Spent 6 years at E&MU teaching ag ed, eventually became the department head, and really enjoyed it there. Wasn't planning on leaving. A nice little place to work. Not a lot of stress. Had a great time there in New Mexico. And then in 2021, had a chance to move back closer to the Midwest. Mom and dad at that time were ailing. So I took the department head job at Arkansas Tech University as running their ag program. And then mom died, and then dad died, and then I tried to die. And I said, you know what? I don't like these adults. You get these people with PhDs, and all of a sudden they think they're smart. I know a whole lot about teaching, but I did not cure cancer yesterday. And sometimes we kind of lose sight of perspective there a little bit. And I took a step back and have a great person now in my life that said, just take some time off. And I took a year off and didn't do anything for a year besides go watch my kids play football and baseball, basketball, and wrestle, and my daughter sing. And it's the best thing I ever did. And then about, a year and a half ago, I started getting bored. My person said, you got to go do something. And so I stumbled into a school that needed an ag teacher way at the top of the panhandle of Texas. That's only 2.5 hours from my kids there in Kingfisher, Oklahoma, in a little town called Canadian, Texas. And it is the oasis of the panhandle. And great little community, got super awesome kids, tough kids. I will tell you, I have seen ag education in a whole lot of states, and those panhandle of Texas kids are the toughest kids I've ever met in my life. And Canadian was one of the towns in that big wildfire about a year and a half ago that burned up 1 million and some acres. A lot of our kids all lost homes. A lot of cattle got burned up in Hemphill County. There's houses in town that still have not been rebuilt. Our school farm was burnt down. We're in the process of getting that redone. But these kids are tough. They're resilient. Hell of a good football team. I've got a hell of a teaching partner, a gal named Rebecca Nogler. She is a non-traditional teacher. She came in with a couple of degrees from animal science and taught for 8 or 9 years in Hereford, Texas, and had a chance to move to the Panhandle. We stumbled into each other. It really couldn't have been a better match. You couldn't draw it up better than what we have now created there in Canadian. Had a little success this last year. Looking forward to starting school. And by the time this podcast airs, we'll probably be starting school. And we're going to make a little disclaimer here. As this is our first and inaugural episode, you will find that the, what do they call the animatronics or the visual aids that are provided on this podcast are somewhat less than what my children could do, because they're a hell of a lot smarter than we are. I have 3 college degrees, and not one of them says audio visual expert. And so I could only take so many classes on the Adobe class from Bring Your Own Laptop, which is a neat little website. And we're not getting any money from them, but it's worth the $12 to learn how to use Adobe Premiere Pro. And maybe someday, if this thing takes off, we'll add some graphics to our screens. But Lyle and I have some uniquely different experiences, but at the same time, for being a generation apart, and this is Lyle, year 4, and this is count grad school in there about 25 for me. A lot of things that happened to me 25 years ago and things that I encountered are what Lyle has encountered. And so as we talk on this first episode here and spend time on what this podcast is about, we're going to jump right in and really just kind of do what this podcast is about. And so since we're at that time of year when kind of getting back. And those of us that have been teaching before kind of got through the summer, went to our ag teacher conference, whatever that may be, whenever that was, and see a motivational speaker or two that sometimes are highly motivating and other times demotivating. We had one at our teacher in service last week, and then the guy was all right. He didn't really tell us anything earth-shattering, but he did bring up something that is important and something that Lyle and I will spend time talking about here shortly, especially for those of us that haven't done this before or are still kind of new to the game. And that is that very important task in building relationships with your students. The guest speaker, the motivational speaker we had at school last Monday, I spent time talking about, classroom management and lesson planning and those types of things. But I am of the belief that everything is a function of your relationships with your students. And if you haven't met your students yet, take the time to get to know them. And Lyle, tell us what you do to get to know your students. How do you start those relationships? How do you continue those relationships? And how does relationship building help balance out? How do you manage your classroom, still allow students to be kids too, just the same?
Well, I think that when I first start out, the level of involvement in which you help students, I believe, right off the bat is how you build relationships. We had one student here just a couple days ago that asked me if he could build a trailer. All right. And Stephenville is known for manufacturing some pretty nice trailers, and they built some pretty nice projects in the ag mechanic shop. So that's my primary focus. Now, when I was in Panhandle, I was involved mostly on the FFA and animal side. And now I have the opportunity now to really, really, truly dive deep into the realm that is ag mechanics. And I sometimes feel myself that I'm way behind in that regard because I was not your per se ag mech kid when I was in high school. I was way more involved on the leadership side, and so it's been there's not one day that I've had in my time in teaching that I haven't been challenged. There's most days are there. I find that if I have a plan, most days are pretty simple. Okay. And if I find that I don't have a plan for the day, it's going to be a difficult time because I'm always winging it and trying to make things happen. So first thing I do, try to gain a relationship with students. So I got to know their name, and number two, I want to know something that they like to do, and so I feel that I can relate to them in that regard. And then I find that students who maybe share a similar look to me, maybe, or can identify with me a little more. But I also have to understand that all of our students come from a variety of different backgrounds, different challenges, different opportunities or different lifestyles that they enjoy or are a part of or lack thereof. And so by building relationships with students, I think they must understand first that I care, or at least try to care. And this is a demanding profession. There ain't nothing about it that ain't demanding. There's a lot of pressure, especially when we're maybe building ag mech projects or we are meeting the gazillion deadlines that we have to meet as ag teachers all the time. There's a deadline every day to get something turned in, to get something finished, to get something started. You have to be careful to not get consumed by that. And we talk a lot about, and I'm sure this will be several episodes talking about work-life balance.
Yeah.
And whatever that is, and whatever the research is that's been conducted, the only thing that I can say without running the statistics is that is tough. That is tough because our relationships with these students are 24/7.
Right.
Because agriculture is 24/7. And as an ag teacher, we're not so much different from those who are involved in production agriculture. It's 24/7. It is your life, and it's your responsibility, and it's the kind of challenge that is unique, and it's the kind of challenge that is rewarding, but it has to be met every day. It has to be met with your best foot forward every day, and that's not easy. And I may be preaching to the choir, and I don't, that saying preaching to the choir.
Well, this is the ministry, so we are at church.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the ministry. So, listen to the gospel here. But as the preacher once said, I could write a shorter sermon, but once I get started, I get too lazy to stop. And so, but that's what we do. We try to make helpfully that these students can go on into a career in life and be better than we are, and try not to make the same mistakes or pursue or have the same work ethic that we do. But that's the kind of thing. Sorry, technological difficulties.
Hold on a second. Wait a minute. You teach at Stephenville High School. How many millions of dollars is your new Art Briles named football stadium, and you guys can't keep your lights on?
It's on a motion sensor, so I got to figure that out still yet. I gotta bang on my
Okay.
table to make the motion sensor come back on, so I got lights.
Uh,
Anyway, I'm still trying to
huh.
figure that out. I tried to duct tape the light switch earlier, but it didn't work, and so we're gonna live
That's an
with it for a while.
that was an ag teacher fix right
Yeah,
there.
duct tape and zip ties and WD-40. If you can't make it happen without that, I don't know how to make it happen.
And so Lyle talks about, building relationships and talking to kids about getting to know them and really caring. This is one of these worlds where you can do 8 to 3 as an ag teacher if you want to. And you can do I don't know the kids' names. I come in, I teach, I leave, I meet my expectations and mark some boxes off on a teacher evaluation. But if you're in this business and you're doing that, you know, I'm not going to say you're wrong, but you might want to revisit some other opportunities out there. Because if you're in this world and you care about what you're doing, your first and foremost responsibility is to care about what those students do and what happens to them. Ag teachers are a different person than the rest of your teachers. And a friend of mine who used to be on faculty at the University of Arkansas in ag education, a faculty woman named Kate Shoulders, did a research study several years ago on just how different ag teachers are than your typical teacher. And ag teachers don't necessarily identify as teachers, don't necessarily identify as ag people. We, in fact, identify as ag teachers. We all of us have a passion about agriculture, but we all share that passion about taking care of kids. And most of us are in this game because of some ag teacher that was in our life, whether it be a great one or maybe one that wasn't good. And we didn't want to do that to future students. One of the guys I student taught with was like that and had a pretty poor experience in high school and became just an outstanding ag teacher after he got going. But regardless of my upbringing, I guess, in ag education versus my student teaching colleague, we still shared that passion for ag and passion for students. And getting to know those students that will set the tone for your entire school year. And if you're new to this and this is your first week of school and you just graduated from X university back in May and you student taught, if you haven't already figured out a little bit by now that it's doing this for real is a little bit different than doing it with a cooperating teacher. And if you're jumping into this game from outside of this world, the most important thing you can do outside of some of the little things that we're going to talk about later on some of the day-to-day managerial aspects of your job, the most important thing you can do is start building relationships with your students on the second they walk into that room. Shake their hand, give them a 5, give them a knuckle pound, whatever it has to be. Get to know those kids, get to know their names, get to know their parents, little brothers, little sisters. Here in Canadian, we started football practice a couple of weeks ago. We had a bad year last year. We went 10-4 and made it to the state quarterfinals, and pretty down year for the Canadian Wildcats. But we'll be back up again this year. We got a pretty good group of boys coming back, and I go to the games. Now, granted, my son is a starter at Kingfisher High School, and so I'm going to balance it out. I'm going to hit Kingfisher and go back and forth. But go to those games, watch those kids. We had a cross-country meet in Canadian just this last weekend, and I went down and talked to my students, and one of my good students, a boy that I'll leave his name out because I haven't asked his parents if I could mention him yet, but I had one of my boys won the cross-country meet and set a new school record, and I was there watching, and that's going to pay dividends because when kids see you out there supporting them outside of your classroom, that tells them that you care about what they do when you're not with them. And parents see you, school board members see you, your administration sees you. And that's the steps that you begin to take to become a part of that school community. Now, ag teachers, we've always done a pretty good job of kind of putting ourselves out there on that little island. Some of us work in buildings that are separate from the main high school, or we're way back off in the corner. And sometimes teachers that don't know us confuse us with custodial staff because we've got a keychain that's enormous. Being seen at those places where students can see you and engaging in their activities helps you engage in that school community as well. And when students see that you care and the other teachers see that you're involved with these students, you're not just the ag teacher. Now, don't get me wrong, being the ag teacher is important, but becoming engaged in that school community helps build those relationships with those students and with those fellow teachers that you and your colleagues, that helps build those processes that you can implement to manage your classroom and help manage your program. And now, with that though, however, at about midway here through the first episode, a little more than, we're going to take a stick it out, and we're not going to do a commercial, but we are going to talk about one of our big important partners here at the Ministry of Gentlemanly Ag Teachers, and that is Brian Williams at judgingpro.com. And if you are a young ag teacher or an experienced ag teacher, and you have aspirations of training a livestock judging or dairy cattle judging team, and even some meats in there, check out Brian at judgingpro.com. He does a nice job with getting classes put together. He has great industry leaders that talk about the classes and discuss why classes were placed the way that they were, from those individuals that are kind of leaders in that industry, to help provide some insight into, to give your students some insight into learning how to judge livestock the right way. Brian breaks it down nice and clear and does a great job. Brian was a great ag teacher in Missouri. He and I go way, way back. We judged soils together and against each other when we were in high school. I student taught under his ag teacher. We've known each other for a long time. And I'm not just plugging Brian and Judging Pro on this, although I think it'd be worth your $250 a year for a subscription. But Brian is ag teacher first, and he is important to us here because ultimately, he's transitioned out of being an ag teacher as far as getting paid by a school district, but he's still an ag teacher because he does a great job working with students, and he's never going to shy away from you giving him a call and just asking him how you do this. One thing that you're going to find, young teachers and new teachers to the profession, which leads us into our next little section, if Lyle can get the lights to work there at the Stephen Bell High School, Art Briles Stadium. We just graduated from college. We're taking that new job, Lyle, and we want to save the world. We want to be the best ag teacher we can, or the best ag teacher in the world. And I'm never going to tell a young teacher that that's not going to happen. But I am going to tell you that it's harder than you think. And there's a lot more that goes into being a great ag teacher and hanging all the plaques on your wall. And I've got some differing philosophies on that too. If you're teaching to hang plaques on your wall, you might want to go find something else to do, but that's just my opinion. You know, you got a young ag teacher starting their first job, that train's coming pretty fast and things are looking pretty big. You know, you've got to manage a classroom, you got an FFA chapter to run, you've got SAEs to manage, and then you've got all of the stuff that are those other duties as assigned by the school district and faculty meetings and morning duty and lunch duty and maybe some bus duty. And then you maybe have a school farm. You know, Lyle, when it comes to, especially you younger folks, and because I've done this for a day or two and I know what I do that makes it work for me, you know, how over the course of the last 3 or 4 years for you, how has starting the school year different now than what it was when you first started, now that maybe that train isn't traveling at you so fast? And what do you do to kind of plan and get ready for that, you know, first couple of weeks of the year?
Well, I preface this by some advice that I was given, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago by Dr. Gary Moore at North Carolina State University, who's a renowned historian on all things ag education, okay? And
they don't call him Good Time Gary Moore for nothing.
I don't call him Good Time Gary Moore for nothing. I had an opportunity to visit with Dr. Moore in North Carolina one time, and we went to North Carolina State, and he had there's nobody that has a collection like Gary Moore. And, you know, he showed me North Carolina State, and we were walking around, and he has, I don't know if it was in the basement maybe of the Department of North Carolina State, but somewhere there, he has a room that the university gave him for a library. I mean, and it is chock full of books on the history of ag education. He even gave me a book on the history of ag education in Georgia, which is wonderful and still practical. Many of the tried and true things are still practical.
Right. Yeah. Never left.
Yeah, it never left. It doesn't die. And it doesn't die, especially if people don't want it to. And by the success of agriculture education, we can tell that people don't want it to. And so I said, what, in your years of experience and of many, many, many years of experience in being involved in ag education, what are some things that I should know? And he said, well, if you're organized and have a plan, you'll be successful, not only as an ag teacher, but as an educator, period. Have a plan, be proactive in that aspect. And so when I look at, as opposed to back then as to now at year 4, and not to say that I know anything, but number one is you need to recognize that as an ag educator, you are a pillar of the community. Okay.
Right.
You are way more than an educator. You're a mentor, you're a coach, and many people, as indicated by, even look at Ag Teacher Hall of Fames that are popping up everywhere
Sure.
in a
Right.
lot of
Yeah.
states.
Right.
We're showing that people look back years from now and know that what we're doing is important. Swaff, that's an interesting question, because I was visiting with my dad yesterday about some things, and uh, my dad, neither of my parents have college degrees. And they are some of the hardest working people that I've ever known. And I'm glad to call them my parents. But I was talking to my dad yesterday, and when my dad left home, he was 14 years old and he had about $5 in his pocket. My grandparents, which were great people, they were ag people all the way, but it was a hard time. It was in the 80s, the farm crisis, everything was going on. There wasn't no money. Nobody had no money in ag. And so he was telling me that when he was 14 years old, he had a wrestling coach that really, really poured into my dad when he was, I don't know, 13 or 14 years old. And that wrestling coach told my dad, said, "Hey, I know you work after school, and back then a lot of kids who were in ag worked after school, and they still do
Right.
today.
Right.
But, in the fall you had wheat harvest and you had all these things, and you didn't have time for, it was hard to be an athlete at the same time, especially if you didn't have a little bit of backing at home."
Sure.
And so he was talking to me, and that wrestling coach told him, he said, "If you want to come in the morning, I'll come in early in the morning and we'll practice and we'll work on wrestling." And wrestling in the Midwest, of course, is a huge deal. And
Sure.
everybody wrestles up there, Nebraska, Wyoming, whatever. And so, which dad's from Nebraska, but that wrestling coach was one of the first people in my dad's life, I think, that told him that he had some support. Okay. And so dad eventually told the coach he couldn't go to practice anymore, because by the time he got off doing work and had homework and things, and my dad will admit that he wasn't a great student, which is, my dad's a very intelligent man. It's not relegated simply to grades, whether or not you're going to
Sure.
be successful.
Right.
But he told that wrestling coach, I can't come in the mornings anymore. I'm too tired. He said when dad bought his own pickup and he had to pay his own insurance, and he said his parents were broke and they were having a hard time and he just couldn't do it anymore. And that to me was my dad never, he's not that way. He's not going to complain. He's not going to say, I know he had it rough. I do know that. I know dad had it rough, and he's done everything in his power to make sure that the people around him he supported, and we never went hungry. We never went without growing up.
Sure.
But dad, it's funny to me, not funny, but it's very interesting that dad can look back from years ago and say that he can still remember that coach doing that for him. And dad knew that coach heart was in the right place and trying to help dad and things like that. But that coach, there was no talk. That guy straightened up that high school where dad went to
Sure.
high school at, and he respected him for that. But all that to say, there's some days where it's a thankless job. There's some days where you may not get the recognition that you deserve, but maybe years from now, maybe when you're dead and gone and pushing up daisies, what makes it worth it is some kid can look back and go, well, he cared about me, and that's what it's all about. And whether it's taking that little bit of time to do that. And regardless of all the trial and tribulations and all the things you go through, and, the things that make you question whether or not you should keep doing this, well, it means something to somebody somewhere. And so when I think about that too, you know that you're more than just a teacher. And as an ag educator, also, do we have a good grasp of the 3-circle model?
Ooh.
How do we balance that? How do we
That's an
balance?
episode. That's an episode topic, or
There
maybe
you
2
go.
episode topics right there.
There you go. But as I can come as an ag educator, do I have a good understanding of the 3-circle model? But like Theo Vaughn says, he says, I may not know what I'm doing, but I'll show up and do it every day. And so,
That's right.
yeah, I may not know what I'm doing, but I'll be there every day. And so you learn together on some things. But, do I have an understanding of why SAEs are important? Do I have an understanding that these kids need to walk out in the world with some skills? And I don't care how technologically advanced we become. Somebody's got to run the technology, or else it's going to run us. And in some cases, it runs us. And I'm not a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of us being in control and not being controlled by the other end of it. And so that's and how do we make sure that FFA involvement is critical? How do we make sure the kids have an SAE? And how do we make sure that as critical as us as educators are are capable of teaching in the classroom. And we've been using the same model for education, right? Lecture based, standing
Sure.
up in front of the kids. We've been doing that for the last 1,000 years. And how do we keep their attention span? Well, in the state of Texas and a lot of other states, we banned cell phones. Kids are different
Ooh,
without them.
yes.
Kids talk to each other, and
Wow.
they don't talk about each other through text or Snapchat or whatever. I mean, they talk to each other, and we're human again. It's comforting that we're starting to try to be human again. And so that's some of the things I think that need to be focused on, that I'm trying to focus on as an educator. And you're never going to be perfect. There ain't a man alive that has been born yet to this earth that has made everybody happy and satisfied.
Sure. Now I've been pretty close. Even so, not often. And and Lyle talks about some important things here, but it all comes back to just a couple of things: building relationships and having a plan. And one thing that Lyle and I will never ever do, and I'm never going to say that I've done it perfect every single day, every day since I've been doing this. Now, you're going to have those days where everything clicks. And for you young folks and those that are new to the profession, those are the days that you look back and go, man, everything worked. When you start, those days may be a little more infrequent than they are frequent. And that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. Okay. You're really not. But when you have those days where everything just fell into place just like it was supposed to, go home and get out your beverage of choice, whatever that may be, or whatever it is you do after school to kind of relax, and think about why everything fell into place. And that is important. Reflection is one of those things that a lot of times gets lost in the shuffle because the lights go out at Stephenville Art Briles High School and you forget about thinking about what went right. We always talk about what you did wrong, and your or whoever's going to do your evaluations will do a good job of pointing out maybe some of your inadequacies. And hopefully, though, they also focus on the things that you do well. And as professionals, we tend to spend more time looking at the things that we do wrong rather than the things that we do right. But especially when you're young, especially when you're new to the profession, on the days where everything clicks, go home, kick back, and think about why they worked that way. Was it because you had that perfect plan? Was it because Johnny was gone and Johnny's a big pain? But think about what you did right, and then use that as the foundation for your plans as you move forward. Building relationships and having a plan is going to address 85% of the problems that you ever encounter as a teacher. Because when you have good relationships with your students and your colleagues, and you have a plan for that class period, that day, that week, that month, that year, whatever that plan happens to look like, you are going to be able to dodge some of those face planting pitfalls that we will talk about in upcoming. But having a plan, from that simple lesson plan to just that big picture calendar of when your big important state and school district due dates are, and those events that you take your students to, some of the PD work that you're going to have to do. When you have a plan moving forward, you are going to eventually encounter more good days than the days where, like, okay, that was a train wreck from the time I got up until the time I went to bed. And don't get me wrong, I have those now, and I've done this for a couple of days. But build on your success, and build on your success early, and create future plans based upon those days where that day does go right. And then, just as importantly, when you have a day that it doesn't work, or everything backfires, or the new welding tables don't, you can't ground your new welders to the new welding tables because there was paint on the welding tables that you told the students to take off that didn't get done, and it takes you the rest of the day to get your welding tables up to speed so you can use your new welders. Happened to me, year 24, and so, gang, it happens. So, if you take anything away today, the two big things that we would like to make sure we remember: start now, start early, and build those relationships with your kids. Go to the back to school night. Go to the football preseason game. Go watch your kids run. If your kids play volleyball or have fall softball, or whatever it is your students do outside of ag, and you can sneak in and those kids can see you, even dirty after going to the school farm or whatever, you just made their day. They may not say it, but their actions will tell you that they do. And start creating your plans if you haven't already done so. And we'll spend more time as the podcast goes on, and probably next week we're going to spend time looking at building monthly, semester, and year-long calendars, so that you can kind of have that idea of those points to base everything off of. So when the spring rolls around, or whenever your busy time of year is, you can encounter those challenges with a plan, so that you can kind of navigate those waters. And I'm not going to use the word survive, because that kind of gives ag education a bad connotation. We always talk about, if you can just survive your first year. And Lyle and ours perspective is different. We want you to thrive that first year, so you come back the next year and come back the next year and become one of those old graybeards like me that doesn't care about my resume anymore, and all I care about is teaching my students and supporting my teaching partner. And so with that, well, I guess we're going to call this first episode a success. I guess we'll figure it out when we see how many views we get on YouTube, and we get this thing blown out there on the podcast. But thank you for joining us. And from the Ag Building, this is the Ministry of Gentlemanly Ag Teachers, and we'll see you in the Teachers Lounge next week. Thank you.
We'll see you. Don't forget, we're well-mannered and
well
well-manured.
manured.